So welcome to the second episode of Dictate the Tempo, a brand new podcast. We are in partnership with dictatethegame.com, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support on the first episode, the first podcast, which went live 2 weeks ago. Currently, we are going to be doing this every 2 weeks as we lead up to some FM25 news, which I'm sure will be coming before the start of 2026, I hope. Tonight, or this morning, depending on when you're listening, I am joined by an OG of the FM Central world, one of the old hosts of the FM Central podcast. We are joined by Colin, the FM Yank. Welcome, Colin.
Howdy, sir. This is bringing back all kinds of nostalgia here. It's been a while.
I'm sure when you told your wife you're going to record a podcast with Paul, she said, sorry, are we back in 2014 now?
She started with Paul, which Paul, and then once we reoriented, it was good from there.
Which Paul? Sorry, who?
It took her a minute.
There's no need. There's no need. I want to thank you for dragging yourself off the retirement sofa to record a podcast.
Oh, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Hopefully the first of many. It's always nice to get a perspective from someone who is used to looking at an egg, and he's going to discuss around football today.
Well, I spend, I don't know. I still consume way more of the round ball flavor than the oblong shaped these days.
It's what we like to hear. So there's not too much happened since the last podcast, but there has been a statement put out by Football Manager on their X account and on Facebook. Now, strangely enough, Colin, if you go to footballmanager.com, their official website, okay, and you scroll down, you have latest FM news, and they've decided not to put this update on the latest FM news. So the latest FM news is Football Manager 25 delayed until March.
Yeah.
Now, this update is basically an update explaining about the database update because people had been requested. I think this should have been put on the website as well. But I'm gonna read it in my most newsreader's voice I can do, and then we'll discuss a little bit of it, which has me a little bit concerned. So, Football Manager 25. Following the announcement of the delay to FM25, many of you have called for an official FM24 update with season 24-25 data. This is something we've been exploring since the initial internal conversation about postponing the game's release. Having now scoped the work that would be required, that's a question I want to go back to. And despite a good initial response from many of our licenses, we cannot lift assets that we are using in FM25 and make them work in FM24 without recreating them in full. The same applies to the many competition rules, translations, and database changes that cannot be back ported. The updated assets and data would both be required to obtain licensor approval. They cannot be separated. This is a substantial undertaking which would take critical resources away from delivering FM25 to the highest possible quality. We'll see. Which we simply cannot compromise on. If you have pre-purchased FM25 and wish to seek a refund, then please contact your retailer. We thank you for your patience. Can we first off that they seem to end every announcement with, if you want your money back, you can have it. A little bit concerning that they're so desperate to mention that. If you want your money back, listen guys, listen. If you want your money back, we can give it to you.
I suspect that there's a lawyer somewhere behind the scene who's making sure that appears everywhere. But I'll agree with you. I'm not sure it's the most awe-inspiring way to say, "Hey, we're ready to deploy, the biggest change that the game has seen in, ever potentially. And well, if you're not so sure about it, you feel free. We're not going to hold your money hostage. So I don't know. It just feels like there's a lawyer on that one. But no, I'm with you. I would say, I mean, this latest update too doesn't make me feel all warm and fuzzy. And I suppose the other side is what's going to end up potentially coming down is that you're going to see, community developers and if they can put together, a lot of databases and stuff like that. And I don't know. It doesn't fill me with lots of confidence. I'll give you that.
No, it's just every time they tweet, I have all notifications on for their X account to make sure I don't miss anything. Just bad news after bad news.
Yeah.
But this is what has had me thinking. After I've read this a couple of times, and all I keep thinking is, if I was going to release a official data update for FM24, technically all they have to do is go, okay, then just release what we have in the editor now. The fact that they are saying it would require a complete, basically, build to make that. They can't do it with what they are working on for FM25. Does that point towards the editor side of Football Manager 25 being completely different FM24? And does this then throw into doubt the creators, the community creators who do this stuff for free to enhance our game, who have already started the low league databases, which they normally start a year in advance, then just import into the new game's editor? Does that concern you that there's a chance that it's not going to be compatible?
My guess and my read from that is it's 100% not going to be compatible. So I give you two thoughts. So the first one is I was actually a bit surprised because I would have thought, being in the position that they were in and knowing the community and how many people are engaged in, especially to your point, in all these databases, and that is to say, look, put a call out and say, hey, can we pay people in the community to potentially, help fill this void, right? As a way to not deter their resources, because I kind of understand where they're coming from on that. Although why it moved so much and they seemed to act somewhat surprised is a little beyond me. The one that I'm more and more worried about would be, as you look at the move into FM25, the number of licenses, especially with the with the Premier League and English football and more, showing up more as a licensee, is whether part of those contracts are basically going to say, hey, you can't have open people editing and adjusting. So whether FM25 is, or FM24, I guess, is technically the end of the game being as open as it's been historically. I think that's a very real possibility.
Very concerning when myself, I like to do some things in the editor, and I'd just be concerned that, is it going to get blocked off? But then I guess when you look at other games on the Unity engine, for example, they do have very good editor ability. So I guess for that side of it, it's not going to be an issue. But like you said, the license stuff with the Premier League coming in and stuff, are they going to be more strict? Are they going to turn around and go, no, this is how it is, you can't adjust it? And I did try to think back to old managerial games away from Football Manager and if they had the ability to edit, but I couldn't think if they did or not, so I'm not too sure on that. Maybe somebody could let us know who's listening to the podcast, maybe in the comments. I'm not sure. I'm just a bit concerned because also I've responded to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I really appreciate the fact that you've come out and explained this. Are you able to explain, does this mean the editor is having a big overhaul in the way the rules and transfers are done, etc.? Is it totally different, and would need recreating. Don't quite know what I even meant by that last bit. But basically, like, I just want them to give us some information on, is the editor going to be the same? Is stuff that's made in FM24 going to be compatible, which I've asked on a previous tweet I gave them as well, and everything's ignored when you tweet and ask them questions like that. And it's like, help, please, people. Like, we are buying your game, we are trying our hardest to promote your game. As a content creator, we are putting word out there to even one person who might buy the game due to watching the content or listening to the podcast. You never know. And even just a general fan, they must know if the editor's going to be the same or if it's going to be different. Just answer the question. It can't be under an embargo. You can't tell anyone. Oh no, the editor's going to be different, but don't tell anyone, because them guys who are working on the databases, we don't want to upset them. It's going to upset them more if they spend the next 5 months building something and find out they can't transport it over.
Totally. I can't imagine. My guess is most people have probably slowed, given the lack of information, and to your point, the communication hole that seemed to be in there. I mean, I can't imagine saying, okay, look, I'm going to take a risk and invest a whole bucket load of time to find out that I just wasted the last 5 months of my life. Like, so, I would assume a large chunk of the community has gone on pause, waiting to hear what's going on. You're exactly right. There's no way. Well, let me reflip that around. If they're this far and they're not sure if stuff is different or not, you're not going to see a game in March. But so all things being equal, they have to know. And my guess is that it's different, and they haven't figured out how to tell. If I had to speculate, and that's what this is, 100% speculation, I would say they don't know how to tell the community without getting into a huge kerfuffle.
It's like that thing, isn't it, of, like, I have it at home, my kids do something wrong, and instead of telling us, they just keep quiet about it, and it ends up making it worse.
Right.
It's like Football Manager's basically a kid, and they're too scared to tell us the truth. And it's just going to backfire on them in the end.
Yeah.
But
I think big time. I think
it's year after year. The biggest. I think I wouldn't be shocked, Colin, if we went back to FM15, FM16, and we listened back to the podcasts pre-release. I would not be shocked if we are not complaining about communication. I wouldn't be shocked. I would not be shocked if that's one of the things we brought up in these podcasts when we had the FM Central one, if we were discussing the exact same thing.
I do remember us talking about. I mean, they've never been particularly good with where things are at, or the communication. And the other side is they've also been pretty. The one thing they have been pretty good is pound sand. We don't really care what you think. So I'm a little surprised we haven't gotten that as much in this me. So I guess there's some evolution going on there.
Miles has been quiet.
Yeah, usually I remember historically he'd always been a little more aggressive with as things got closer and people pushed back on the communication. He'd been a little more vocal, but he seems to have been very, very quiet this time.
Let's be honest, we all miss it, don't we?
It was fun. It certainly produced some quality moments of him going back and forth with people, for sure.
There's nothing better than seeing the guy who's in charge of the game coming out and just going, "Look, mate, if you don't like it, don't buy it." not bothered, mate. Not bothered. Move on.
Yep. Yeah, those were some quality good times.
I guess we can just hope and await further news. I know in January we are hoping to get some news on some feature announcements. We're hoping to get some news on a roadmap, which actually leads to an actual destination, not just a dead end like the last roadmap. So it's something to look forward to. And like I say, I've said before, and I'll say it again, every single year Football Manager gets better. So I am hoping that FM25, even after the delay, will come out and we'll all go, do you know what? This is a good game. except for the fact it's missing a few things, like in international management. It would be nice to have it. It would be nice that it was just there as an option. I find it weird they've removed it because it wasn't up to the standard. Let's be honest, international management's been fairly poor for a long time now, so leaving it as it was for another year wouldn't have been the end of the world. So I'm very confused why they've had to remove it. But again, something we are not privy to and we'll never find out, I guess, Colin.
No, my guess is this will forever be a great mystery of the universe. If I had to guess, just from experience in large scale engineering projects, that this is all scope, right? So that there's a finite amount of time and a finite amount of people and a finite amount of work that they can get done between now and when they need to get this done from an obligation perspective. And my guess is that somebody's sitting on a development board counting up the amount of work or the number of points to get some of these features done, and they're just in the process of jettisoning ones that physically they can't get done and keeping the core game together. So my guess is that's where to your point, yeah, international management's been junk for a decade at least. So if it was junk again, nobody was going to get all worked up about it, that it wasn't going to take a step backwards. It was already not particularly easy to play. I mean, it was just a lot of clicking for nothing, and a lot of dead space in between it. So if it was the same, I doubt people would be all that worked up about it. But my guess is that they just ran out of time to move features over, and they're just jettisoning features to make sure that they actually get an FM25 out. My worry and what I'm sitting down and watching is I want to see what they say about 26, because my fear is one of these games is going to end up being incomplete, and whether it's 25 or 26, I don't know yet, but we'll have to see.
I'll be very annoyed if it's 26. I'm just saying. I think
I don't disagree, by the way.
No, I think one of the things, I guess we're beating that same drum again, but I've got to say that, like you said, they just kind of getting rid of features that they just weren't able to get done in time. But it took them till within, 6 or 7 weeks of release before they turned around and went, hang on, do you know what? I don't think we can get this game out in time.
No.
And then they turned to each other in the meeting and said, hang on though, mate. Literally 2 days ago we started selling pre-release. And they went, yeah, we've messed up there, mate. We better move it. We better move it. So
having been in big businesses long enough, I can almost guarantee that was a communication problem as opposed to a development problem. There was no way that they went from thinking this was going to be done in November to thinking this was going to be done in March. Like that just doesn't happen. And unless somebody was sitting on something that they shouldn't have been, that this was an internal communication problem between departments versus we suddenly realized we were 3 months or 4 months, 3 months or 4 months later than we originally thought we were. Like, that's a weird surprise.
I guarantee there's someone sat listening to this podcast now going, wait, hang on. You're telling me that Sports Interactive had a communication problem? I don't believe it. I don't believe it. This guy's making stuff up now. But let's move on to positive things, shall we, Colin? So I decided to release a new series on my YouTube channel. I decided to go to Portugal after a suggestion from someone in my Discord. Mm-hmm. And I went with Boa Vista. So I'm now in my second season with them. We finished 8th in season 1.
Nice.
So we were expected mid-table. First 6 months of season 1, we were in a transfer ban. So we didn't have anybody and we couldn't sell anybody because we needed them. So the players who had a year left on the contract, we had to just allow them to run down, which was fun.
That's painful.
But we got through season 1, finished mid-table. In the summer transfer window, that video came on January. It came out on Monday. Just gone as we recording this, and I sold our goalkeeper for 10 million, which has basically funded everything now for the next year or two. And we've just had a huge rebuild over the summer. We brought in, basically, when you go transfer history, you've got to scroll down to look at your transfers. That's how many people we brought in. We spent 7.5 million, but that's not actually true. Because 6.5 million, that is loan fees, and one of them players we sent back straight away. So
Oops.
I brought in 2 players from England on loan. We brought in Manuel Benson, a winger from Burnley. Now it says loan fee 5 million. That's incorrect. It's 5 million if he never played for us, because it's £200,000 a month if he's playing, £500,000 a month if he's not playing, and he is playing every minute for us. So
I wouldn't care how good or bad he was, just to keep the bank account in the right place. He'd be sitting out on that field playing.
Yeah, just play me. We can't afford the extra 300k.
Yeah.
And we also brought on. I needed a striker. We desperately need a striker, so I signed Lyndon Dykes because he was good in the air. He was tall, strong. I can even tell you his weight in this Football Manager. He was 84 kilograms. Hey, well, remember these moments. He played 6 games for us before I decided he was not worth the monthly fee, so we shipped him back to Birmingham City. Thank you very much. Please don't ever contact us again, was that type of conversation. It's been interesting. You pick up them players. So I picked up a left winger from another club in our league, a 27-year-old Brazilian called Zé Ricardo. And according to my scouts and my coaches, he's a leading 4th division player. So that filled me with hope when he was coming in to be our first choice left back.
That's warm fuzzy.
I looked and I'm like, hang on, mate. You're telling me that the left back I've signed for 100k is a 4th tier player for this division, for this country. And, well, he's played 16. I'm going to give you a bit of a spoiler, but I'm 16 games into the season with him. He's got a 6.99 average in the league, with a 85% pass completion, 73% tackles completion. He's picked up a couple of assists, a goal as well, a man of the match. He's picked up a red card as well, just for the lols of it. And yeah, if this is a 4th tier left back, I can't wait to sign a top tier left back. He's
the
been
Bram Ellison
solid.
of Bovista.
Oh, still got the screenshots on my computer. And I guess the only other player I want to properly mention, if you want to see all my signings, etc., go and check out the channel, is I signed a striker to replace Lyndon Dykes. I picked him up from Baník Ostrava's B team. I think that's a Czech side. It is a Czech side. So I picked him up from their B team where he hadn't scored a goal in 4 games. I know what you're thinking, Colin. What a signing this is. He cost me £54,000, okay? He's played for Slovakia 9 times, scoring 0 goals. He sounds terrible, doesn't he? He's called Ladislav Almasi. And so far for me, let me just tell you, he's got heading of 15, finishing of 12. He's got jump and reach of 17 with balance of 14, strength of 15. He's 6'6". He's got decisions off the ball, composure and bravery all of 14 as well. So he's basically float the crosses in and let him score the header.
You got a Peter Crouch.
Basically. And he's also 91 kilograms, in case you wonder. He's played 14 games in the league, and he's scored 12 goals and picked up 3 assists.
Dang.
He's
the kind of bargain you love, so.
With a 7.43 average rating as well.
Damn.
I mean, at 44% shot percentage on target as well, which isn't bad. Every 2 shots, he's pretty much getting 1 on target. So, I've got to say, for 54k, this guy's an absolute gem. An absolute gem. So, tomorrow's episode, which goes live, it will be showing that, well, yesterday's episode, because this podcast goes out on Thursday. We're doing well. We're in the hunt for European qualification. We knocked on that door, the 4th, 5th place spot. We obviously way behind Sporting, Benfica, Porto. But we moving in the right direction with the third lowest spenders on wage as well. So we are making profit roughly each month, which is fantastic because it does mean going into the next season and the season after, we can look at just increasing our wage budget bit by bit and looking to bring in one or two gems just to make the squad that little bit stronger. But I guess I've got to ask you, Colin, what are you doing in Football Manager at the minute? Have you started a new save to tie you over for the next 20 years, or what's going on?
So I did. So let's see. I've had a winding path over the last few Football Managers. So if you remember back to the original FM Central, I first appeared there looking for help with Billericay Town. The very first save I really jumped into. So I went back into them a couple of years ago and finally won a Champions League with them. Messed around a little in South America, so I did a save a couple of years ago with Cruzeiro. So winning, I made them the winningest team in South America. So we won lots of Copa Libertadores, which was a lot of fun.
Is that a word? Winningest? Winningest?
The winningest, yeah.
I'm gonna Google it while you continue. I'm gonna Google if this is a real word.
Then I got enamored with some small scale stuff, so I went back to Europe and ended up winning a Champions League with FC Santa Coloma out of Andorra. That was probably the hardest save I've ever done. That took forever.
That was a save to remember. Could you give a couple of highlights of that? Because I remember that and it was crazy. And also, winningest is a real word. Which actually shocks me.
I don't make everything up, just some stuff. That was the first proper real challenge, right? So you know, England, even with Cruzeiro in Brazil, right? Eventually, you start to get enough inertia, and the leagues are good enough that either your youth systems, general player availability, or the money you have at your disposal tips you over the top, and you eventually get good enough, or can get good enough, to win. It just becomes sort of a level of inevitability. That was the first time that it wasn't. That it was a sit down, and you really, really have to tactically manage your way through, especially early on in the to just get to the Champions League or even getting into Europe generally to have enough money, right? The team was good enough that any team I fielded was going to steamroll the domestic league. So it was all about, survive in Europe as long as possible and then just sort of grind out the domestic league and rinse and repeat. So that was the first time, and it sort of built the style I've been playing with since. So I dove deep and I actually spent some time, a lot of that was probably the highest content consumption that I had for a long time in FM. So I spent a bunch of time with Bust the Net, and the thing that sort of set the ground for that save was he did a Champions League of tactics where he you put in and he handed out teams, and you basically had everybody had to have a different tactic. So it was he handed out kind of high level formations and you put it all together, and then he simulated everybody's team. So I got a 4-4-2 in that one, and I just handed Atletico Madrid. So I went down a rabbit hole and a half of Diego Simeone and kind of popped out the other side with a really physically aggressive, really fast, transitioning 4-4-2 counterattack that I've lived ever since, and that's sort of my go-to on it. And I plugged that in with Santa Coloma, and then it took a few years to obviously start getting, or a few seasons to start getting the right players and really understanding who the right players were. But once I sort of unlocked all that, then I got through the middle part of stuff, and then obviously, as you're trying to get to the top end, it's all about scouting and recruitment and digging in and finding those hidden gems that you can develop into real players, because there's no youth system to speak of or any of that kind of stuff inside of it. So a lot of good player development experience, and really scouting, recruiting. First time I ever beat, I'm trying to remember who the first big European, I think it was Bayern, was the first big European side that we took down, and I think pretty much half the neighborhood heard me when we actually won that game. And the Champions League win, I've never been. We beat Barcelona, and I was ping-ponging off the walls on that one. So that was a favorite. But for now, I've resettled back in, and I dragged an oldie but a goodie, and one that you'll remember. So I dragged Truro City back out. So from our race to the Premier League from so many years ago with your FC United of Manchester. So in the second season right now, so we got promoted out of the Vanarama South first season, and now we're kind of mid-table. Second season, I got about 8 games to go in this one. We're not going to get out, and I'm good with that, and kind of purposely not getting out. We don't quite have the depth, and my system really relies on strong fullbacks, and they're kind of a glaring hole right now. So going to take the opportunity to stick around in this division for another season and tighten up some of the deficiencies we have in the side, and see if we can put the pedal to the metal to get up to proper league football.
Do you you speak about this 4-4-2? I remember when that was in full flow in your old saves. Fantastic domination almost of how you would let teams come in and you just batter them on the counter, like you say. How, if you could explain it very quickly, how you would set that up, what would be if you could, I know it's a very on-the-spot question, but
sure.
For example, when I'm setting up my tactics, I always look at, okay, we're going to go wide, we're going to float the crosses in because I've got my big man up top. We're not going to counter because I don't have the pace to get back at the minute, for example, if we lose the ball and stuff. What are your key aspects you're looking for when you are setting up that? Is your team so focused on them hard-working teamwork style players, or is it about speed? Or is it a specific instruction you're setting in the possession or in transition or out of possession?
Sure.
What's the key aspects?
Sure. So I kind of to build it up, I kind of think of how do I want it to look, and then sort of work backwards from there. So critically, the way that I have it work is the team sits back, very compact, very compressed, invites you in, and then we look to take the ball off as quickly as possible, and then from there move it upfield as absolutely fast as possible. So end-to-end transition is key. Now, at least with like Truro and even in bigger sides, and when you get to the top, like I can't have blazing speed everywhere on the side. So a big piece of what I look at is that the team's very focused about edge play and wing play. So fullbacks and wingers are where the speed lives. And then center backs and midfielders are all about like high physicality grinding. So, I'm looking at, ball winning midfielder, nothing fancy. I would say, the roles aren't particularly fancy. It's really elegant movement of the ball up the field quickly, but I'm not looking for, I don't need Javis in the midfield, right? I'm looking for people who are smart, can see, and find a way to move the ball fast. So a lot of physicality in my center backs, a lot of physicality in my midfielders. And then, the goal is get the ball out wide, and then typically it's low crosses in to the striking pair. This right now I'm running it with I've got a target forward and an advanced forward playing off of them. So kind of key instructions to your point. Hit early crosses is a big one. High tempo, high directness. I'm with you. So in transition, this is all about regrouping and maintaining that discipline, and then countering when we have the opportunity. Out of possession, typically a low block. and then I'm a big get stuck in, so I try and keep the lines as compressed and condensed as possible, so you just don't have room to move through us on it. So that's kind of the key stuff that I look at, and then really what I use is the mentality. So I don't know, the light bulb when I was working through this stuff and kind of watching a lot of the and listening a lot to what Bust the Net was doing was think of mentality as risk that the team wants to take. So I adjust the mentality a lot during the course of a match to basically adjust how much risk I'm willing to take. So, I'll start it in, more like cautious defensive if I want very, very low risk. This is really just set up and frustrate. And then as we start to get a foothold, moving up into, balanced, positive, attacking, very attacking. If I think I've got room to exploit with the speed, or, if there's particular areas on the pitch for the opposition that I can exploit based on my system, I start to push the risk level up into more of that, kind of positive attacking, very attacking space to try and, put a crack in where I see those holes. So that's kind of how I manage through it. It's a lot of active in-game management, but mostly just around that mentality. The core of what the team's doing stays the same. It just becomes a risk management exercise during a match.
I think it's fascinating that, as you say, you're adjusting the mentality more than anything throughout a game. You almost just kind of use it, instead of, for example, shouts, you are using that to like, okay, guys, we're cautious at the minute. Okay, maybe start to control that game a little bit more. Okay, let's go at them now. I like that. I like that. It's such almost like a bit of simple advice to people, just to use the mentality. And I guess in FM25, when shouts are gone and you can no longer speak to players, it'll be nice to adjust that kind of thing. I do know I have seen that it looks like there's going to be an in and out of possession tactical setup on FM25, so I am excited to see how that works, how we can set it up, and the amount of detail we can go into when it comes to that, because I would love to work on some tactics where we are looking at maybe regrouping. So instead of counter pressing, maybe looking at, okay, how do we set up a tactic when we lose the ball? We want every man to get behind the ball. I'm kind of interested to see how we can make that kind of thing work for FM25.
Yeah, the whole match engine and the tactical setup is the part that I, ever since they announced, kind of the revolution that FM25 is supposed to be, is the part that I've been most intrigued by, because there's a lot of, playing with like, player instructions and opposition instructions and things like that. So it has been a lot of ways to try and manipulate what players do to get exactly what you want out of them. Yeah. So I'm hoping that it gets to be a little more straightforward. And, to your point, you have more control over how individual players behave or not behave, and being able to tune them more so that, as you have, because you can't always get the player that you want. Sometimes you just get the play, sometimes you get somebody that you have to compromise on. And if there's more tools in the tactical setup to be able to utilize them more effectively in your systems, because at least for me, I'm pretty rigid about the system, and I'm really putting players into the system as opposed to bending the system around the players that I have. Some of it is just because the system isn't, on the surface isn't the most sophisticated, so it's not like I'm trying to fit somebody into a Guardiola level, system here where I need, 9,000 specific things. The system is relatively straightforward, so I have a little more latitude there, but it would be better to have some more tools and some more options and just some more ability to adjust roles a little bit to get not the perfect fit to behave the way that I'd like them to behave on the pitch.
I think that is something to look forward to, and hopefully throughout January, if we get the information and stuff, maybe little features start to drop through February time. We'll hopefully be discussing in more detail these kind of things when we have information, screenshots, hopefully a bit of in-game footage, all of them kind of things. So it is something we've just got to sit back and wait for it, to be honest with you, and hopefully things will come to pass. Now, one thing I did want to mention is somebody commented on the last podcast about the attributeless skin, which is getting used by Patrick, who was on the last podcast. And I think it's fascinating. I think it's something which I've had to look at but didn't dive into. And I'm now looking at the possibility of maybe doing a 1-season save with that skin to almost just look at how it works, how I manage it, how I can control it. But I feel like the only way to make the most of that kind of skin, where you've got to basically learn how to view a player, would be to control a team that you know nothing about, to be honest with you, Colin. I don't know if you would agree that if you are controlling a team, you don't know the players, you don't know how good he is at shooting, you don't know how good he is at defending. You then have to learn every circle, every dot on the screen, and understand the skin to its biggest detail.
Yeah, the less you know about a side and the players and that are involved, the more you have to figure it out. So I used an attributeless one. I think when I was doing, was it Crucero years ago, a couple of years ago. I did, when I was playing, I think that's the one that I did attributeless, because I was clueless, right? I mean, I consume and watch a lot of South American football just because it's easier from where I'm at. So I didn't have a whole lot of knowledge of players and exactly the leagues. I mean, I know big sides and all that kind of stuff, and a few retreads that are leaving Europe and doing some retirement work there. But yeah, I think I think you're exactly right. Is don't start in a place that you know and you're super familiar with, because you're gonna cheat the system a little bit. But it is a really, really interesting way. I think at the end of it, it makes you a better player, because you take away some of the crutches that are easy to use in terms of I've got a center back with a heading of 17 and a tackling of 16. Okay, I know more or less what I'm getting into, versus okay, is the problem my system? Is the problem the player? Is it the role? Is it just the string of games that he's on? How I'm using him, when I'm starting him, am I overusing him? You just have to spend more time digging in and really understanding what's going on. But I think at the end of it, then it forces you to learn how to make the right adjustments and changes and whatnot as you go further. So I think it's something everybody should at least give some time and energy to, just to help make you better at it, at the game.
But I think during December time a video will come. It's going to be a full season, so I'm probably going to do it throughout just one video, because I'm not sure what the interest in it is, and to be honest with you, interest on the channel at the minute in general is very low. But I'll definitely give it a go and just see how it goes, see how fun it feels controlling it, see if we can have a successful season with the team. Maybe I'll pick a fairly strong team in a league and see if we can go on and win the league, even though I can't understand the game how I normally would. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll keep plodding along as we get towards FM25. There's still a long way to go, and there's a lot more content to create and come up with. And me and you, Colin, were discussing before we started the podcast, how are full-time creators going to survive the next few months? Because I've noticed a big drop-off in views on my videos, and I have a job, so this is pocket money for me, which just goes towards improving my computer even more. These people have to make a living from the game. Well, they don't have to, but they are making a living from the game, which has now just been delayed massively. And I feel for them, and I do hope that people continue with interest. But at the same time, I understand a lot of people might have said, right, then I'm just going to wait for FM25 and I'm going to go off and do something else. Go and play City Skylines or FIFA or EA, whatever it's called now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, when I first saw the announcement of the delay to March, that was, I mean, besides the initial, that's a pain in my neck, and well, now I got to fill it. I do feel, and it'll be interesting to see how a lot of them react. And I think a lot of the video, I mean, that was probably the most FM content I'd consumed in a while, was just watching some of the bigger names that I was familiar with, kind of coming out and at least trying to share with people, A, how they felt, and B, what they were going to try and do. And I'd say I do give a lot of credit to a lot of folks in that space with being very open and honest of, like, I'm going to do some thinking, but I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm kind of curious long term what it's going to mean and what it's going to do to the FM creator space, because it is such a key component to what you said earlier, the marketing, the outreach, the getting people interested, helping people learn how to play space that are they going to get wary and diversify away from the game because it's going to have holes and interest is waning during these kind of periods or not. But yeah, I certainly feel for them and the anxiety some of them must be feeling of what are they going to do for 5 months before who knows what's coming out the other side.
Such a long time, 5 months. I've got to give credit to Zealand. I'm a big fan of his content, and I never used to watch him. But big fan of his content now, and also the fact that he came out and said it how it is. Said it how it is, called them out, and said how it's basically unacceptable. So I have to say fair play to him on how he put all that across. But that's it for the podcast. We will be back in 2 weeks to discuss our saves and hopefully discuss a bit of... I don't know what we'll discuss. Maybe a bit of attributeless, maybe a bit of a dive into the scouting or tactics side of Football Manager. We'll have a community question on our Discord, etc., and see what people think. But thank you for reminiscing on the old times, Colin. Very much appreciated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Hopefully you won't be a stranger and we'll see you very shortly.
Absolutely. This was awesome to get back in and do this again. So it was a lot of fun.
I mean, it's important that your wife feels like you have plans too. Like, she needs to know you were busy today. Thank you for tuning in, people, and we will see you next time.